Welcome to Historical Bedtime Stories, where whispers of the past echo in the dark. Tonight, we climb through jungle mist and rifle smoke, beside a young lawyer turned rebel. This is the journey of Fidel Castro, from the Sierra to the palace. Settle in. The revolution is about to begin. Cuba in the 1950s was a paradise for the few and a prison for the many. The sugar-rich island was controlled by a corrupt elite, with President Fulgencio Batista ruling through military force and political repression. American corporations owned vast plantations, hotels, and industries, while rural Cubans toiled in poverty. Havana glittered with casinos, nightclubs, and mafia-backed deals, but in the countryside, children went barefoot, and education was a luxury. Political opposition was silenced with brutality. Elections were a farce. The promise of independence from Spain decades earlier had soured into dependency on Washington. Beneath the surface, tension simmered. Students organized protests. Intellectuals whispered of justice. In the hills and slums, a new generation asked why the revolution had never come. Among them was a young lawyer named Fidel Castro, watching from the shadows, reading history, and preparing for a role that would upend not just Cuba but the world. Born in 1926 to a wealthy landowning family in eastern Cuba, Fidel Castro was raised amid privilege yet surrounded by inequality. He was a bright, defiant child, curious, confrontational, and unwilling to accept the limits imposed by authority. Educated by Jesuits and later trained in law at the University of Havana, Castro was drawn into the world of politics and protest. There, he witnessed student movements, gang violence, and the creeping control of Batista's military dictatorship. Inspired by the lives of José Martí and Latin American liberators, he saw the island not as a playground for the powerful, but as a land betrayed. Batista's 1952 coup deeply angered him. Legal appeals failed. Peaceful resistance felt futile. If the courts would not deliver justice, then the rifle might. He came to believe that real change could only be won through revolution. The boy who once read law now dreamed of insurrection. July 26, 1953, Santiago de Cuba. Before dawn, Fidel Castro leads around 160 rebels in an audacious plan to seize the Moncada barracks, the second-largest military garrison in Cuba. If successful, they would spark a popular uprising against Batista. But things go terribly wrong. Poor coordination, equipment failures, and fierce resistance from soldiers turn the assault into chaos. Dozens of rebels are killed or captured. Fidel survives but is soon arrested. Batista responds with brutal repression. Tortured prisoners, show trials, and executions dominate headlines. Yet amid failure, Castro becomes a symbol. He names his movement after the date, 26th of July. What seemed like a doomed attempt plants the seed of a future revolution. The young lawyer in army fatigues has taken a step into legend. Blooded but unbroken, he now stands not only as a man of action, but as a man with a cause that refuses to die. In the courtroom, Fidel Castro chooses not to hide behind a lawyer. He stands alone, unshaven, defiant, and determined to use the stage for revolution. His 5-hour speech becomes the stuff of myth. With logic, emotion, and historical references, he condemns Batista's tyranny, exposes corruption, and lays out a vision for Cuba. "I know the law," he says, "but there is a higher law than that written by men." The judge listens. The press takes note. His closing line echoes across the nation, "History will absolve me." Though sentenced to 15 years, Castro emerges as a national figure. He is sent to prison, but not silence. The speech is smuggled out, printed, and shared. In cafes and farms, people speak his words in whispers. He has failed militarily but triumphed morally. The Moncada trial marks a turning point, the beginning of Fidel Castro as not just a rebel but a revolutionary icon. Prison becomes a political classroom. Fidel and his comrades serve time on the Isle of Pines, but they are not broken. They read, debate, and organize. Their sentence becomes a university of revolution. Meanwhile, political pressure mounts. Batista, feeling international heat and sensing a tactical benefit, releases the prisoners in 1955. Fidel wastes no time. Threatened with rearrest, he flees to Mexico. In exile, he begins the next chapter. There, in modest rooms and secret meetings, the 26th of July movement rebuilds. He recruits old friends and new believers. Among them is his younger brother Raúl and others disillusioned with Batista's rule. They begin training in guerrilla tactics, mapping out a return to Cuba. Though defeated before, Castro has grown sharper, more disciplined, more dangerous. Mexico offers a brief calm before the storm. But Fidel is not content in exile. He is preparing for war. The real fight is yet to come. In Mexico, fate introduces Fidel to a wiry Argentine doctor with piercing eyes and radical convictions, Ernesto Che Guevara. The two men talk late into the night, discussing empire, Marxism, revolution, and sacrifice. Their bond is instant, ideological, and personal. Che is not just a dreamer, he's ready to fight. He joins the cause with fierce devotion. Together, Fidel and Che form the nucleus of what will become an international symbol of rebellion. Che's medical skills, discipline, and clarity of purpose complement Fidel's charisma and leadership. Their alliance marks a pivotal moment in the revolution's development. In training camps hidden in the Mexican countryside, they drill volunteers, teaching discipline, combat, and ideology. Che becomes more than a comrade, he becomes a brother in arms. The revolution is no longer just a Cuban affair, it now carries a global heartbeat. With Che, the revolution gains both a soldier and a soul. Soon, they will test it all. In November 1956, 82 men cram into a battered yacht named Granma, setting sail from Mexico toward Cuba's southeastern coast. The sea is unforgiving. Waves crash, men vomit, the engine fails. They are seasick, drenched, and dangerously behind schedule. But they sail with purpose, armed with rifles, ideals, and Castro's promise of victory. Among them, Fidel, Raúl, Che, Camilo Cienfuegos. They aim to land near the Sierra Maestra mountains and ignite a new insurrection. On paper, it's madness. The boat is overloaded, under-provisioned, and tracked by Batista's spies. But symbolism matters. The Granma voyage becomes a myth in the making, a modern crossing of Rubicons and Ruben Dario. After days at sea, they finally glimpse the Cuban coast. Tired, unshaven, and soaked in salt, the revolutionaries steel themselves. The landing awaits. What they don't know, the army is already waiting. The revolution is about to face its first true test on Cuban soil. December 2nd, 1956. The Granma lands, but everything goes wrong. The rebels disembark into swampy terrain, far from their intended point. Hours later, Batista's forces strike. Bullets rip through the trees. Chaos erupts. Many are killed. Some are captured. The revolution seems finished before it begins. But a small group survives: Fidel, Raúl, Che, Camilo, and a handful of others. Bruised, barefoot, and hungry, they escape into the jungle, vanishing into the Sierra Maestra. The survivors split up, regroup, and begin the slow, grueling climb into the mountains. Every step tests their endurance and commitment. Supplies are scarce. Morale hangs by a thread. Yet those who remain are the hardcore. These are the revolutionaries who will change history. The initial defeat hardens their resolve. It turns the movement from idea to necessity. With nowhere left to fall, they begin again, this time, from the rocks, roots, and shadows of the highlands. Hidden among the steep ridges and thick forests of the Sierra Maestra, the revolution is reborn. This mountain range becomes both sanctuary and staging ground. Castro and his tiny band begin waging guerrilla warfare, small ambushes, sabotage, and disappearances into the mist. The terrain is brutal, but it favors the underdog. The rebels know the trails, the caves, the rivers. Slowly, they carve out a liberated zone. Villagers offer food, news, and shelter. In return, the rebels respect the people, paying for supplies, educating children, and punishing abuse. This is no ordinary war. It's as much about hearts and minds as bullets. Fidel's leadership emerges not through force, but through example. He fights, eats, and suffers with his men. The mountains shape the movement philosophically and tactically. The Sierra becomes myth, memory, and military base. From here, they begin to strike, to grow, to believe again. The revolution has survived. Now, it begins to advance. Fidel Castro understands that numbers alone won't win the revolution, people will. Deep in the mountains, he begins building a disciplined, loyal rebel army. Peasants join, drawn by his promises of justice, land, and dignity. Fighters are trained not just in rifles, but in ideology. Discipline is strict. Stealing, mistreatment of civilians, or cowardice earns swift punishment. Che Guevara trains the wounded and educates the troops. Raúl coordinates logistics. Camilo inspires with bravery and humor. Small skirmishes test the army's growing skill. Confidence builds. Every encounter with Batista's troops becomes a lesson. The rebels adapt, learning how to strike and vanish. They document their movement, photos, manifestos, radio broadcasts. Outside the Sierra, whispers grow. The bearded rebels in olive green are not just survivors, they are winners. The movement becomes a magnet for the disillusioned. Step by step, fighter by fighter, the army grows. What began as a desperate band now marches with destiny. In the Sierra Maestra, life is grueling. The rebels face relentless rain, dense jungle, mosquitoes, and the ever-present threat of ambush. Food is scarce, malnutrition and disease stalk the camps. They sleep on the ground, march barefoot, and carry rifles older than themselves. Yet, amid the hardship, something unexpected grows: morale. The cause becomes clearer with every sunrise. The brutality of Batista's regime fuels conviction. Fidel walks with the men, sharing in hunger and exhaustion. His speeches, full of resolve, lift spirits when strength falters. They sing, joke, debate politics by campfire. Bonds form, forged in adversity. Veterans teach new recruits not only how to fight, but why they fight. They believe they are shaping history, not surviving it. And the mountains, once an unforgiving exile, become sacred ground. Here, they are not fugitives, but founders. From these crags and valleys, a future is being born, one hardship, one sacrifice, one step at a time. With bullets few and battles rare, words become weapons. In 1958, the rebels launch Radio Rebelled, a mobile shortwave station hidden in the mountains. Its crackling broadcasts carry Fidel's voice into kitchens, bars, and prison cells across Cuba. The message is clear: the revolution lives, and truth cannot be silenced. Listeners, huddled around radios, hear news unfiltered by Batista's propaganda. Reports of rebel victories, interviews with commanders, and stirring speeches inspire hope. Che Guevara and others contribute, combining military updates with ideological education. Each broadcast is a defiant act, proving the regime cannot control the narrative. Batista tries to jam the signal, but word still spreads. Outside Cuba, foreign journalists catch wind of the rebel voice echoing from the mountains. Radio Rebelled becomes a symbol of resistance, not just to the regime, but to the silence it imposes. In the battle for Cuba's soul, sound waves become as vital as gunpowder. As the revolution deepens, two figures rise beside Fidel Castro: Che Guevara and Camilo Cienfuegos. Che, the Argentine doctor-turned-warrior, becomes a ruthless strategist and an unflinching ideologue. He trains men with cold precision and fights with calculated ferocity. Camilo, in contrast, is warm, bold, and beloved by fighters and peasants alike. He leads with charm and courage, riding into battle with laughter and loyalty. Together, they embody the revolution's dual spirit: Che the stern architect of sacrifice, Camilo the radiant face of rebellion. Both command columns, lead raids, and enforce discipline. Fidel trusts them implicitly, delegating key missions. Their presence solidifies a sense of structure within the rebel army. Che writes manuals, Camilo wins hearts. When they walk into a village, even skeptics listen. These men are not simply deputies, they are symbols. As their fame grows, so does the myth of the revolution. In them, the world sees the revolution taking shape. As the rebels gain ground, Batista responds with escalating terror. His regime unleashes mass arrests, tortures suspected sympathizers, and imposes harsh censorship. Rural villages are bombed from the air, their homes burned for harboring rebels. In cities, security forces abduct students and activists, some never return. Fear grips the island, but it fails to crush resistance. If anything, repression backfires. The army's brutality alienates the population and drives more recruits into the hills. International reporters begin documenting abuses, further isolating Batista's government. Fidel capitalizes on the contrast. The rebels show discipline, mercy, and purpose, while Batista looks desperate and cruel. Even among the upper classes and military ranks, disillusion grows. Whispers of defections spread. Batista's crackdown creates martyrs, not order. In trying to crush the revolution, he gives it fuel. What began as a mountain rebellion is now a national struggle. Batista is no longer fighting just rebels, he is fighting history. July 1957. Near the southern coast, the rebel army launches its first coordinated assault, the Battle of La Plata. Commanded by Fidel himself, around 50 guerrillas descend on a well-defended army post. The attack is swift, strategic, and symbolic. After several days of combat, the rebels overrun the garrison. Dozens of soldiers are captured. Not killed, captured. Fidel insists on humane treatment, allowing journalists to document it. The victory shocks the Batista regime and electrifies supporters. La Plata is more than a tactical success, it proves the rebels can do more than survive, they can win. Confidence soars. Fighters realize they are no longer outlaws but a disciplined force. Recruits flood in. Villages begin to offer not just aid but allegiance. Batista's army, riddled with fear and corruption, is shown to be beatable. La Plata transforms the revolution from myth to muscle. From now on, each battle will carry the weight of belief. The revolution spreads like fire across the island. From the Sierra Maestra to distant farmlands and coastal towns, the 26th of July movement plants roots. Rebel cells form in central and western provinces. Fidel Castro opens a second front in the Sierra Cristol Mountains, dividing Batista's forces. Weapons and supplies trickle in from sympathizers. Recruiters speak in whispers, distribute leaflets, and smuggle radio parts. The countryside becomes a network of fighters, couriers, and collaborators. Farmers hide rifles in hay bales. Teachers teach subversion alongside reading. Fidel's message of dignity, justice, and nationalism resonates far beyond the battlefield. The movement is no longer a mountain rebellion, it's a national insurgency. Even in cities, hidden supporters contribute money, information, and shelter. The revolution has faces and uniforms, but also shadows and silence. Every region becomes a front. The tide has turned. Batista faces not just a rebel army, but an awakening nation determined to be free. While guerrillas wage war in the hills, another front opens in Havana's crowded streets and secret basements. Students organize protests, printing pamphlets and hurling Molotovs. Unions strike. Women smuggle weapons beneath coats. The urban resistance faces constant surveillance, raids, and executions, but they endure. Underground cells form a web of sabotage and coordination. They bomb police stations, derail trains, and disrupt power grids. Some die anonymous deaths, others become symbols. Frank Pais, a teacher-turned-organizer, leads city operations with courage until he is killed. His funeral becomes a mass protest. The rebels in the mountains rely on these urban fighters for intelligence, funds, and public awareness. Their courage under fire is essential. It shows that the revolution is not confined to the Sierra, it lives in every alley, classroom, and factory. Even under Batista's iron grip, Havana pulses with resistance. The city that once seemed owned by the regime begins to beat with rebellion. In 1957, the world finally sees the rebels not as rumors, but as reality. Herbert Matthews, a New York Times journalist, treks into the Sierra Maestra and interviews Fidel Castro. The photos and stories that follow are explosive. Smiling, articulate, and full of conviction, Castro is shown to be very much alive, contrary to Batista's claims. The image stuns the Cuban public and shocks the world. Soon, European and Latin American reporters follow. The myth of the bandit in the hills is replaced by a charismatic leader with a cause. Che, Camilo, and other figures enter global consciousness. International opinion begins to shift. Batista is seen as a brutal dictator, the rebels as freedom fighters. Foreign support for Batista weakens. Arms deals stall. Political pressure mounts. The media spotlight becomes a weapon Fidel expertly wields. In the global arena, the revolution earns not only sympathy but legitimacy. Cuba is no longer isolated. In mid-1958, opposition groups across Cuba meet in Venezuela and sign the Pact of Caracas. The goal, a united front against Batista. Though ideological differences remain, they agree on one thing: Fidel Castro is the revolution's central figure. The pact marks a turning point. Fidel's movement gains not only symbolic authority but political momentum. Nationalist, liberal, and even moderate factions now rally behind him. He becomes more than a guerrilla commander, he becomes the face of a nation rising. The pact also reassures foreign observers: this is not a communist coup, but a democratic uprising. For now, unity prevails. Back in Cuba, the announcement boosts morale. In towns and barrios, people whisper, the end is near. Batista, once confident in the divisions among his enemies, now faces a singular threat. With one signature, Fidel not only unites the resistance, he inherits the burden and promise of leading a future Cuba. Sensing that time is running out, Batista launches his most ambitious military campaign, the 1958 Summer Offensive. Thousands of government troops swarm the Sierra Maestra, hoping to crush the rebels once and for all. They come with planes, tanks, and artillery, but not with the will to fight. The jungle devours them. The rebels, outnumbered and outgunned, use terrain and tactics to their advantage. Hit-and-run ambushes, road sabotage, and misinformation unravel the assault. Soldiers defect, morale collapses, and Fidel's forces counterattack with precision. Che and Camilo lead daring raids that demoralize and dismantle enemy units. Supply lines are cut. Bases are overrun. By August, the offensive has failed disastrously. The rebel army emerges stronger, more confident, and better armed, capturing vast supplies left behind. The failure seals Batista's fate. It is now clear, the revolution cannot be stopped by brute force. The path to Havana is no longer a dream, it is an approaching reality. Che Guevara's column begins its march toward Santa Clara, a vital city in central Cuba. The mission is bold: cut the island in half and strangle Batista's supply lines. With just a few hundred fighters, Che conducts a lightning campaign, taking town after town through persuasion and precision. His men sabotage railroads, disrupt communications, and win local support. They fight when needed but prefer negotiation. Desertion in Batista's ranks grows. The people feed and hide the rebels, welcoming them as liberators. Che enforces discipline, avoids needless bloodshed, and keeps morale high. His leadership fuses charisma and cold calculation. Each village taken is another step toward Havana. Resistance fades. Batista's grip on the countryside unravels. Che proves not only to be a fierce fighter but also a brilliant strategist. By the time they near Santa Clara, the rebels are more than soldiers, they are a symbol of inevitability. The capital trembles with every step forward. December 1958. Santa Clara becomes the final battlefield. Batista sends a heavily armed train to crush the rebels. Che derails it using bulldozers and explosives. The supply-laden train, once a weapon of war, becomes a rebel armory. Che's fighters, supported by civilians, storm the city. Street by street, they battle Batista's forces. Tanks and barricades cannot stop the rebels' momentum. The people rise in support. Government troops surrender or flee. Santa Clara falls. The victory is not just military, it is psychological. News of the defeat races across the island, and Batista's regime collapses from within. The capital is left undefended. Santa Clara becomes the symbol of finality, the blow that topples a dictator. In just days, what began as a tiny mountain rebellion has ended in triumph over a US-backed army. Che's triumph is immortalized. Cuba is no longer a dictatorship, it's a nation in transition. The road to Havana lies wide open. On New Year's Day, 1959, Fulgencio Batista flees Cuba by plane, taking with him his fortune and his fear. He leaves behind chaos and a collapsing regime. The country wakes to disbelief and celebration. Government buildings are deserted, and police abandon their posts. The revolution has won not through negotiation or slow reform, but total collapse. News spreads rapidly, Batista is gone, and the rebels are on their way. Power shifts overnight. Rebel commanders move swiftly to prevent looting and stabilize cities. The military, rudderless and humiliated, offers no resistance. Che enters Havana from the east, Camilo from the west. It's not just a tactical victory, it's a moral one. Batista's flight validates everything the revolution claimed. No treaty, no surrender, just flight in the face of people power. The dictatorship ends not in defiance, but in retreat. For Cuba, the calendar turns, and with it, so does the course of its history. A week after Batista's escape, Fidel Castro's long-awaited entry into Havana becomes a moment of myth. His caravan, a convoy of jeeps and trucks, weaves through cheering crowds. People throw flowers, wave flags, cry openly. Rifles stick out from every window and rooftop, but no shots are fired. Instead, there is jubilation. Fidel, bearded and in fatigues, stands atop a vehicle, saluting the masses. He speaks at length to throngs gathered at Camp Columbia and the University of Havana. He promises justice, dignity, and sovereignty. Cuba is theirs now, not America's, not Batista's, but the people's. The city, once ruled by fear and corruption, now echoes with chants of Fidel, Fidel. It is more than a victory parade, it's the coronation of a revolution. With no blood spilled in Havana, the triumph feels miraculous. But beneath the joy, questions stir. What kind of government will follow this sea of celebration? In the first weeks of 1959, Castro moves quickly. Promises made in the mountains begin to materialize. Land is redistributed to poor peasants. Schools open in rural areas where none had existed. Clinics arrive in mountain villages. The revolution focuses on the forgotten, the hungry, the illiterate, the sick. Doctors are sent to the countryside. Rents are cut. Workers gain protections. Many believe a just society is finally being born. Speeches declare that the people are now the masters of their destiny. Across Cuba, there is hope, but also uncertainty. Private businesses feel pressure. Foreign investors grow uneasy. The United States, which once welcomed Batista, watches uneasily. Fidel assures them he is not a communist, but his policies suggest deep change. Reforms sweep faster than politics can keep pace. The revolution is no longer an idea. It is policy, it is power, it is permanent. And for some, that is exhilarating. For others, terrifying. As the weeks pass, admiration for Fidel grows, but so do the doubts. Some wonder if the revolution is becoming a one-man show. Fidel dominates the airwaves, delivers hours-long speeches, and centralizes decisions. Critics are labeled counter-revolutionaries. Newspapers grow cautious. Some leave the country, fearing what's to come. Supporters argue that strong leadership is needed to prevent chaos or US sabotage. But others whisper, was this ever about democracy, or only power? The revolutionary courts become more public theater than due process. Alleged Batista collaborators are swiftly judged. Foreign observers raise concerns. Within Cuba, the masses still cheer, but unease trickles beneath the surface. Fidel is no longer just a revolutionary, he is the state. Ministers come and go at his command. The revolution has its successes, but also its secrets. What began as a people's movement is narrowing into something more rigid. The question grows louder, where is Cuba really heading? In sports stadiums and public plazas, trials are held for former regime officials. The crowds demand justice and often, blood. Fidel insists that the revolution must cleanse itself of past crimes. Dozens are executed. Some confessions seem forced, others shock even the rebels with their cruelty. Families of the disappeared watch from the stands. Outside Cuba, headlines scream, "Fidel executes enemies." In the US, politicians denounce the purge. Fidel defends the trials, arguing that Cuba cannot rebuild without punishing the architects of terror. Che Guevara oversees executions at La Habana prison, becoming a symbol of revolutionary justice and controversy. Supporters see accountability. Detractors see vengeance. Inside Cuba, the mood is mixed. Many cheer the fall of torturers. Others fear that justice is being used as a tool for silence. The revolution's moral authority is tested in these tribunals. Justice, swift and brutal, becomes both a promise fulfilled and a warning delivered. No longer just a guerrilla, Che Guevara becomes a statesman. He heads the National Bank, helps shape foreign policy, and speaks as Cuba's ideological voice. He travels to New York, Moscow, and Beijing, always defiant, always fierce. At home, he pushes for rapid industrialization and collective labor. His speeches call for the new man, someone driven not by profit but by principle. Che's vision extends beyond Cuba. He dreams of global revolution. He trains fighters, exports insurgency to Africa and Latin America, and becomes a hero to radicals worldwide. Yet his harsh economic policies strain the nation, and his purist ideology clashes with pragmatists. Still, his presence is powerful. He is the revolution's conscience and sometimes its most unforgiving judge. While Fidel governs, Che agitates. Their bond holds, but tensions simmer beneath the surface. In Che, the world sees not just a Cuban figure but the fiery spirit of revolution itself, unbound and untamed. In the early 1960s, Fidel Castro eliminates all meaningful political opposition. Newspapers are shut down or nationalized. Political parties fade. Dissidents are jailed or exiled. What began as a revolution of many voices narrows into one. The media praises Fidel as the father of the new Cuba. He delivers speeches that stretch for hours, captivating or exhausting his listeners. Charisma becomes command. Though schools and hospitals improve, freedom of expression deteriorates. The revolution is not debated, it is lived, obeyed, and feared. Surveillance spreads. Neighborhood watch groups monitor dissent. Fidel claims it is necessary. Enemies, foreign and domestic, lurk everywhere. The Bay of Pigs and US embargo strengthen his grip. Resistance, he says, equals betrayal. The revolution no longer tolerates questioners, it transforms them into enemies. From parliament to press, only one message echoes. Fidel is not just leading the revolution. He has become it. And Cuba, for better or worse, follows his voice alone. The man who once slept in caves, dodged bullets, and walked barefoot into battle now sits at the helm of a nation. Fidel Castro exchanges the mountains for the palace, but keeps the uniform, the beard, the language of rebellion. His transformation is complete, not from fighter to ruler, but from outsider to absolute power. Cuba changes under him, illiteracy drops, healthcare expands, but dissent withers. The island stands defiant, proud, isolated. Che departs to spread revolution, Camilo mysteriously vanishes. The revolution devours its own mythology. Yet Fidel remains, speaking for hours, shaking hands with farmers, locking eyes with presidents. For some, he is the liberator, for others, the jailer. The revolution he led fulfilled dreams and crushed them. It began in whispers among the trees and ended in echoes through palace halls. From Sierra Maestra to Havana's balconies, Fidel did not just change Cuba. He remade it in his own image. And so, the bearded fighter stepped out of the mountains and into the halls of power. Cuba would never be the same. Thank you for spending these quiet moments with us. Until next time, sleep well, and let history keep whispering.